the title, the bread and butter of urban flats that make it very attractive. I mean, it's not a simple recipe as you are going to see during the discussion, but now that we're working in the Global Knowledge Bank on scalable solutions, we thought it was important to share a couple initial points of things that we have been kind of identify of critical points as you prepare projects and in the project implementation related with urban flats. So I will make a very short presentation, but the most important is learning from the regions. So we have three speakers today. We are going to hear from Canto and Guyana, who recently had a project that was closed and the lessons from the ICR. So we learn from this project, so what has been working and what were some of the challenges. And we have Candice representing the team from Burundi, what is a project under implementation. So also she will share also what have been some of the advantages of doing some things beforehand, the preparation of the project, but also what are the challenges that she's facing in a low capacity environment as Burundi. So I hope this, and we have planned 1 hour and a half to be able to have ample time for discussion, hopefully to get feedback, a lot of Q&A, and have a very interactive session. So welcome everyone to the discussion, and I hope this is helpful for the work you're currently leading in your projects and in your portfolio. So one important aspect of these scalable solutions that we are now trying to promote from the Global Knowledge Bank is identifying that it's a critical challenge that many countries face, but also that we have standardized similar approaches, even we have a very diverse type of problems related with urban flats. One important aspect is how we define the scope, objectives, and clearly establish a baseline. We establish what are the type of urban flats that we are trying to address: riverine, flash flats, fluvial, pluvial, coastal. What is the spaces we're trying to cover? We have all type of urban projects related with flats, from some specific projects in one city or addressing metropolitan challenges to multiple cities, for example, in secondary cities project, where we have in one project 4 or 5 cities that we're trying to support, how we address the challenges in the upstream catchment, etc. How we assess those different hazards before the project preparation and during the project formulation, the design criteria. Some of the critical elements, for example, is how we define the return periods that we are going to use as a design criteria for the projects. Unfortunately, not many countries, or most of the countries where we are working, do not have standards for this type of things. So it is a discussion that we always have during the process. And very importantly, also, what are the type of indicators that we are using to monitor the impacts and the results, and how we define the methodological verification for those results. Very quickly, because this is just an introduction, we have different type of hazard risk assessments, from screening, preliminary, used for conversation starters for scoping using global data, to more detailed strategic project concept preparation using a little bit more detailed satellite data, but not the most expensive studies of what is good enough for that project preparation to identify the type of investments and prioritize those type of investments. And what are the more detailed assessments that, of course, are needed to be implemented during the project implementation for the final designs of the different activities. How we are incorporating climate variables, how we manage all type of uncertainties, even how urban development is happening and how that is influencing the flood assessments. We have developed like the Urban Flood Risk Handbook, for example. That is an important tool that contains some of the critical elements to consider for what is the type and the right type of assessment that we are aiming, depending on the phase of the project we are. Most importantly, nowadays we realize that there is no one solution that is going to solve everything. So we need more integrated approaches and how we combine hybrid solutions, gray infrastructure, traditional embankments, dikes, etc., with green infrastructure, nature-based solutions. What is the right mixture of those measures and how we define that? How we link this to risk-informed planning to avoid the future generation of risk. And we see more and more all the projects, including this type of subcomponents, and institutional strengthening for planning, emergency preparedness and response, early warning systems, of course, to manage any residual risk, but also accompanied with the traditional risk reduction for floods measures, it comes all the environmental and social challenges that we have for the project implementation. So how we address land use, how we are addressing resettlement, the management of solid waste is a critical element that normally accompany all the risk reduction projects related with floods, especially in contexts like Africa or other regions. And the elephant in the room, how we think in sustainability, how we plan for operations and maintenance. The project is not only about what we can do during the 5-6 years of implementation of the project, but how we create an operation and maintenance plans and the sustainability elements that are required after the project is closed and how that is implemented. Nowadays, it's more and more important how we leverage private capital, how we integrate flood risk reduction with local economic development, and how this kind of contribute to urban growth and jobs. So seeking synergies, upgrading urban fabric, understanding the potential, for example, if we are working in riverfronts, waterfronts, how we boost tourism, how we connect this with potential in, private sector investment and with job generation. It's not only the temporary jobs that we create while we are making and the investments or the infrastructure that we're developing, but how this connect with future and more stable and larger scale developments. We have a couple projects, for example, one of the ones that we traditionally see is the Missing Bassey project that has elements related with transport, with the generation of residential and commercial centers, and some recreational areas. But none of this works if we don't have the adequate stakeholder engagement. This is a cross-sectoral, multi-institutional challenges that involves from the public works to the environment agency, sometimes, to the specific public services, you name it. There is a lot of agencies, national level, local level, but without the ownership of the communities and the participation of the different stakeholders at the different levels, from citizens, NGOs, adequate ministers, and international partners, of course, the projects are not going to work. So how we involve the different stakeholders and tailor the solutions according with this participatory process, from the initial design process to the knowledge transfer and the capacity for the longer term sustainability of some other critical factors. So in this journey, we normally, and as I mentioned, start with a conversation starter during the scoping of the project. We try to do some institutional assessments and analytics during the project preparation. If we can, we develop more in-depth assessments, and we have created like a framework contract model that the City Resilience Program is leading, supporting teams to do more in detailed assessment up to the pre-feasibility level. But the journey doesn't stop there. It's how we follow up, how we complement and provide the right technical assistance for the procurement systems or for the implementation challenges related with resettlement, related with the complexity of the works that are related to this process is a critical element. So as part of this process, the bank has created multiple tools, has created multiple guidelines and learning events to try to walk us through these different processes. But as part of the Knowledge Bank now, we want to understand what are the challenges that you're still facing, what are the tools that are working for you, and what are other things that we have to think about it where you need more support during the implementation of the process. So this was a very quick introduction. I will stop here and we'll hand it over to Jisung to talk about the experience from Canton.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? And also look, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you very well.
Good, good. Okay, thank you so much. So just one quick question. So you want me actually to run the slides, or somebody from the side actually run the slide?
You can run it from your side. I have it as a backup here, but I think it's easier if you run it yourself.
Oh, okay, okay. Give me a second. Where is the slide? Okay, there we go. All right. So, oops, sorry. Give me a. Oops. Oh, okay, here we go. Oh, so I'm sorry. I have some. Give me a second. Stop setting. Okay, now go back again and say. All right. Okay. So can you see the slide? Yeah. Can you all see the slide?
Yeah, we see it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm sorry actually for taking a little bit time actually to fit the presentations
You want to
on.
put it in presentation mode?
Yes, I'm doing it right now. What could I? How do I? Where is the button? Sorry, like, how do I put it in the?
It's okay. You can. Okay.
Oh, no. Okay, it's up. Right. Okay. I'm sorry. So thank you so much, Anna, and everyone, and thank you so a lot actually giving an opportunity to quickly introduce to the group, to the communities, at the project that actually the team from Vietnam actually very proud of. So you see this on the slide actually the title project, but this is the this is the first ever generation of project like that in Vietnam, given the bank has presented in Vietnam more than 30 years. 30 years. However, this type of the project, like the project in Canton, is the first ever generation that actually the bank ever had in Vietnam. We actually look totally comprehensive in terms of addressing the key and priority issue in Canton, in the cities in the capital city of Vietnam. So for those who might not familiar about the Canton cities, you see the map of Vietnam. So Canton actually located right in the heart of the Mekong Delta, which actually is a very flat area, very flat plain area. where contribute actually like 1/3 of the Vietnam agriculture sectors, but also like 80% of the Vietnam agriculture, Vietnam, export of the agriculture product, to the world. So Cần Thơ city itself actually is a regional hub for the anti-Mekong Delta, become actually is more the main agricultural industrial zone of the Mekong deltas, and most of and this is also the fourth largest cities in Vietnam, with a population of about 1.5 million. But every year, so because located in actually in the heart of the Mekong Delta, so Cần Thơ every year also face a huge challenge actually on the flooding. Basically, the city actually was flooded every year, like every year. So people actually get familiar with the water, with the high water, but because of the economic development, and, infrastructures and access development, and more, commercial private sector also located in. So it's got more and more damage, over times. So that's why it's become actually more Amazon issue, like more Amazon issue for the city need to be addressed. So it impact not only about the economy, also impact to the people health, and also like all aspect related to the economic development. So here, if you look actually more a little bit detailed in the cities, so you see actually the core urban area of cities right there, just next to the Mekong River, right? Just very next to the Mekong River. So basically, the project actually like to build to support the city, actually to protect the flood from two sources, one from also river, and the other one also from the rainfall, because one actually like one actually the city is surrounded by the embankment, and the city become the batu is it's also the big issue for how actually fast the system can be absorbed, and also discharge the water to the river in the high water level season. So basically, let's quickly to come through the project design. So the total envelope project is about 300 million US dollars. This is actually, again, this is the first ever of the generation of project like this in Vietnam for the single cities, because usually we always have like multiple province or city in one project. And each of the city had a very like small intervention and very fragmented. But this time the city is the first generation. So basically the project include like four components, but the intervention actually really in the three component. The first one is more on the flood risk and environmental sanitation. The second one is more on the connectivities, help actually to improve the connectivities from the core cities also to the underdevelopment area, which actually is now develop very fast. And then the third one actually is more on the capacity building. Basically the project help the city actually to set up some sort of like common platform, enable all the relevant department in the city, and local authority can be able to access ins and use the same, in the same platform, same data, and for their own analysis. I will come a little bit further later on in the next slide. Okay, so the project will implemented in 7 years. I will also will come to challenge why 7 years, starting from 2012 and just close 2 years ago in 24. And the project also co-financed by SECO, which actually like grant money. SECO totally provide like 10 million grant money to the cities to co-finance some of the activity, partly or the component three. Okay, here's some quick result. So the reason actually I come up with this result first, because it's really important. It is the core how to maintain this. This is how to maintain the investment, the infrastructure investment financed by project, right? And also how to help actually to train the coordination and ownership of the cities. What I mean is like relevant agency and local authority. So basically, the project just to help the city to establish a common platform we integrated three another, integrated three, let's say, I would say sub-platform. One is on the database system. This actually allow every every local authority and department be able to actually set the data, update the data, and download the data, use all the data as only in one common flow. It's never exist before in any city in Vietnam, any city, not only in Canada, in any cities. The second actually subsystem actually is called the flood risk management information system. This actually is enable some of the technical department and local authorities like agriculture department who responsible for flood risk and DOC who responsible for the construction of cities actually be to do, let's say, the more integrated master planning, the master planning activities in that city. At the same time, it's also help actually the cities to operate all the infrastructure system, including also the flood protection system that financed by project. And last but not least, actually also equally important, the project also actually established the disaster resilient social protection system, which all integrated. It actually allow the city and local authority and even also the people, the citizen also access and to know how like to know actually where possible like when this flood happen and how much impact they would actually get if the flood happened. So that sort of thing and have the local authority like Department of Health and Department of the social management actually can be able to quickly mobilize the financing support for the emergency response and that sort of thing. So those are really important and that component also co-financed by SECO. So SECO basically actually provide all the technical analysis and support. The IBRD from the World Bank actually financed all of the hardware like you see on the screen. For instance, this is actually the city center operation centers for all the system. So the IBRD actually financed for all the equipment and operation center. So here some of the like tangible result you will see. So basically actually again that I mentioned in the project actually had three component finance like over 10 kilometers of the new embankment around the city. You see actually in other slide you see actually like the ring, the protection rings that project finance, and also like 15 kilometers of open canal. We actually drainage canals and like 12 kilometers of sewer and pipe system. We actually have because in the city both the pipe actually is a combined, which actually drains both the storm water and also the wasted water. At the same time, project also provides some connectivity again to connect the core urban area with also the Asian area, which under the development of the cities, because most of the industrial area, this is actually industrial area where most of the private sector industrial park and also located. This is really important to improve the connectivity between two areas. So so the project actually basically provide the protection for 2,500 hectares of the land in the core urban area with the total population who live in that core urban area is about 420,000 people, right? So here it's quite interesting actually. In here you see actually like how the economic impact of the projects to the cities. So basically actually like the project, all the system protection system actually were completed in 2023. Before that yeah, it's under the construction, of course, and then the system actually completed by that by 23. So you see actually like the big, like the different of the development in the cities from that year onwards, right? Like the employee, even also talking about the job, actually the employee also like increased 40%, right? So project actually like enable the environment that support actually for the development, including also getting more job and more more interest from the private sector to locate it in the cities than before. So yeah, so this some figures you see on the screen, like it's quite impressive actually in Kantar cities. Um, so yeah, so how could we actually get this? It's actually like it's quite a complex and time consuming analysis and consultation through the project design and implementation. So similar to the slide that Anna actually also presented, introduced at the beginning. So we use a lot of analytics. We actually like did a lot of analytics work before the project design. So basically, when the bank back actually in 2012, 2013, and the bank team came, and then the city proposal were very fragmented. Some investment here, some investment there. Is now no connection. Is nothing clear. So we actually mobilize a lot of like technical analytics, work to help the city to understand the big picture. We do we do the of course the all the detailed hardware analysis, with the different scenario of investment to see the flood risk, how the flood risk actually would happen, how much of flood risk in the different investment scenario and different also area, because the city by that moment of time the city also have a very ambitious goal for the city development. And then we also overlay with some sort of like economics analysis, which actually we also consider the area-based development and also the land value capture, in which we actually can we were able to actually show the cities like with a different investment scenario, then the different economic benefits you can get, and even also like the revenue, how much the revenue in each scenario that city could get. So when we done this, we actually also run all the very complex consultation, because as you know that the Kanto city located right in the middle of the floodplain and flat area of the Mekong. So any intervention in anywhere in within the Mekong will also impact to other area. So what we did actually, we do the analysis for the entire Mekong with a different investment scenario to see how the flood impact to the other province, to the Asian area. And then once we done everything, then we also run through, consultation with the academic and research institute, not only in country cities, but at the national level. We do the consultation with, multiple consultation event with the national level, with the different provinces. And then we also organize but I remember by that time we have a couple of workshops, but like the two big workshops actually we organized, where we had a presentation of all Mekong River, Mekong Delta provinces, and also all the national ministries also participated actually to just discuss on the different scenario of the investment and it like its possible impact in each scenario. And then so basically actually it's quite like intensive by that time. All the analytics and consultation actually we took like more than 12 months. We start from 2012 but until 2030 anyway. So this consultation not have actually like to give a better understanding to the client, but also actually to strengthen the ownership of the client. in the project. This is really important actually later on during the implementation, right? So finally, actually, like the project design, the way that we focus on the core urban with some of the key investment system. Oh, by the way, the key investment infrastructure system is like the build the ring protection, and then inside we also we also apply the green development, which actually the project finance all the main drainage system, including also the open canals, lake, the water storage, like flood water storage lakes in the cities, as well as also the pipe system. So one of the main then the city then the city using their own budget actually to upgrade actually the secondary system to connect with the primary resident financed by the project. So basically, again, is a project actually enable the better environment for the city in terms of reducing floods during flood rates, increasing actually the investment from the private sectors, and basically for instance, the land price actually increased almost 300%, comparing with the year of the project prepared and by the year of the project actually completed. So it's actually help the city to unlock all the urban values and all of the interest of the investment from the private sector in the city. So yeah, but the success actually is actually the a good is a result of the strong ownership and collaboration between the World Bank, the government, the city themselves, of course the SECO who co-finance also some of our important activities under the component trees, which is as a written, a very crucial system for the cities, and then and the local people who actually really benefit from the project. Yeah, of course, the project itself, not only in terms of the design, but it's also very complex in terms of the implementation, because anyway the cities the project is really focused on the core urban area where most population and the dense area, so that's why the project phase, like quite challenging, face a lot of challenge during the implementation. First of all, actually is the government uh, 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 economic and political dynamic in the countries. So the government had a big campaign on anti-corruption, which actually also impact a lot to the project implementation, because it's actually slowed down of the all the decision making process and that sort of thing. Um, at the same time, again, because it's called urban, very dense population, so the project actually also, face a lot of challenge in terms of land acquisition. Deal with like for instance, in terms of land acquisition, the project impact to around nearly 9,000 households, and among them is about 1,000 households actually were relocated relocated. It's very complex, and then project also had like at this GIS system, and the project had received like more than 300 GIS cases over the project, over the implementation cost, and the GIM is like thousand cases actually also project received from the GIM system. It is quite crazy for that. And at the government side, one thing also very important. So 3 chairmen were removed from the position. Five vice chairmen also were removed from their position. and one chairman of the district level who actually were arrested and now in jail just because of the collusion with some of the people who make the fake land use, land ownership paper. So that's why I actually make the project is so complicated in terms of the land acquisition and project also, that's why the project also received like big amount of the ZSKs and ZMKs. Yeah, that I think that's all. But I have some other slide actually, just so quickly show you actually the photo before and
Yes.
after project, so you see actually
Okay,
how.
very quickly,
Yeah,
the pictures.
yeah, I'm going very quick, just very quick. So you see actually the differences. The photo all the photo were made exactly the same time, but just in different year. So you see, yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Too soon. No, this is
Okay.
really very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing the good and the challenges, and because that's really what we wanted to showcase here. No, the impact and the results are huge and are very good, but it's a challenging process. So that's why we have to consider so many variables and so many elements. So let me hand it over now to Artesa in Guyana to showcase the project from Guyana. Artesa, over to you.
Trying to share my screen. Please let me know if it comes through. Can you see it, Anna?
Yeah, we can see it now.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Hi, Zoom. Nice to see you. Hi, Matthias.
See you
Please
too. Thank you.
correct anything I say that is incorrect immediately, please. But good morning, everyone. I will keep it short because I think that there are a lot of good discussion points, and maybe we can touch on more details in the discussion portion of our session. So I'll be speaking about the Guyana Flood Risk Management Project. This is a before picture from Guyana. Matthias may have taken it. But I will do a little bit of a cheat and show a video, if you don't mind. I think that might be a little bit easier as a starting point. Please let me know if you can't hear the audio. This is supposed to begin.
It's not coming yet.
1 second. A little bit easier to share more about the project with this. I'm hoping it will come through. Sorry, just trying to make it bigger.
The East Demerara Water Conservancy provides 60% of the capital Georgetown's drinking water, and it serves a major function in retaining floodwater from riverine flooding.
It holds 250 million cubic meters of water, so it's a major amount of water.
In 2005, the Georgetown area experienced a very large rainfall event that affected 200,000 people in the coastal plain of the country, as well as impacting 60% of the country's gross domestic product.
The flooding in 2005, the water in our home was about 1.5 feet in height, or someplace 2 feet. So this was how high it was inside the house. And then the water leaves so much damage. I'm a tailor by profession, so I had to move to higher ground to get the sew. And it's perfect.
It was a wake-up call.
The World Bank has been supporting the government of Guyana for over a decade to manage its risks from flooding and climate change. And this partnership really began through the Conservancy Adaptation Project in 2007.
Hi.
And so the project was initiated to try and help the government of Guyana take some measures to protect this asset, but also protect the people who are living in the area that is served by the East Demerara Water Conservancy.
So the flood risk management project was really important in establishing a methodology for strengthening the dam, making sure that it was up to international standards so that it would protect the population downstream of the dam from an event, a very rare rainfall event such as the 2005 flood. And it's pretty much complete now along that section, which means that the dam is now protected to a 1 in 10,000 year event, which means that even if we have a lot of rainfall, it will not overtop.
And then the Guyana Flood Risk Management Project carried on this work by trying to focus not only on the East Demerara Water Conservancy, but the entire drainage system, including the channels, the sluice gates, the pump stations. This includes the upgrading of the Liliandal pumping station.
Myself and my friends, we named the new pump Bullet. Bullet is carry the water so quickly. Brother, I welcome it. And my friends around here, we welcome it because we know we're not going to see flood again.
The completion of the Lilian Dam pump station is really a milestone in our engagement with the government of Guyana on building resilience to flooding.
Especially critical infrastructure in DNI to manage our water system.
So these are investments that represent the beginning of reducing the impacts of flooding, whether it be reducing the amount of time that highly populated areas of the city are flooded, and also reducing the impact of flooding in terms of damage to infrastructure, to assets, to businesses, and to social services.
I really want to thank the government with the World Bank for doing such gesture, because it would be making the whole of Georgetown safer.
All right, so just a quick intro to the project, but also a little bit of context setting as well. So here's a little bit of, Here's a little bit of information about the project. It was a $35 million US dollar project. In total, it received an additional financing once. The objective was to reduce the risk of flooding in basically a large part of the coastal plain of Guyana, bordered to the north by the Atlantic Ocean and to the west by the Demerara River. The timeline was from 2014 to 2024. So a lot of lessons learned, a lot of challenges. At closing, the bank rated the project satisfactory, and then IEG came back and said, no, this project isn't satisfactory, it's highly satisfactory, which I think caused a lot of people to fall out of their chairs. But contextual information about Guyana, in the period of time that this project was designed and certainly implemented, the country has changed dramatically. So in the past 5 years, I looked it up. So last year, the GDP growth rate of Guyana was over 40%. And for the last 5 years, it's been ranging from over 20% to 40% GDP, annual GDP growth. And this is on the back of a massive offshore oil discovery and production. So today, Guyana produces 900 billion barrels of oil per day. Sorry, 900,000 barrels of oil per day. So we can imagine that not only is sort of climate change impacting the flood management and drainage system in the country, but also simply the massive urban growth and urban development and transformation of the coastal plain from agricultural land, so sugar land, to basically rapid urbanization. So it's kind of an interesting confluence of the challenges that we face when designing flood risk management projects, which is it isn't just about the level of hazard exposure. It isn't just about climate change impacts, but it is about sort of the economic transformation that is also going on in many of the cities and countries where we work. So just very, very briefly, sort of setting the scene in terms of Guyana's coastal plain. So you see in the northwest corner of that map is Georgetown, bordered to the west by the Demerara River. The coastal lowlands extend all the way west to Venezuela and east to Suriname. And this is the agricultural plain of Guyana, largely below sea level. And you'll see the East Demerara Water Conservancy shown there. From the air, it doesn't look like water, but it's about 580 square kilometers of water retention area. And the dark line around it is what we refer to the dam. It's basically an earth embankment around the conservancy. So, as I mentioned, the coastal plain of Guyana was predominantly agricultural for hundreds of years. And so what we actually see as this very nicely laid out canal system is was intended to be dual function irrigation and drainage, but for an agricultural land use, developed and built and planned for an agricultural land use. It's a coastal system, so the system comprises floodgates or sluices or pokers, as they call them here, an extensive canal network, and of course supplemented by pumping capacity and these large water retention bodies, which are called conservancies. So to the best of my knowledge, there's EDWC, which is a big one. There's a Western Conservancy, and I believe there may be one more. Low gradient river flow, but of course, not only was the system designed not for the purpose of rapid urbanization, but there is, of course, that persistent and quite common problem of insufficient maintenance. So coming to the components of the flood risk management project, a large infrastructure component, but a significant institutional strengthening component, and of course your typical project management component. So just in terms of the key outputs, 11 kilometers of the EDWC embankment were rehabilitated. I think this is out of a total of about 70 kilometers, those 3 legs of the embankment. And increased drainage capacity in the form of improvements to pumping capacity, like we saw with the bullet pump at Liliendal, but also rehabilitation of a sluice in one particular location. This is important because the follow-on project now concentrates on rehabilitation of a subset of Guyana's portfolio of sluices. Just to reflect and echo what Zoom said, this engagement with Guyana really began in 2007 with the Conservancy Adaptation Project, which was basically a technical assistance project to try to understand what could be done to strengthen and upgrade the EDWC after the experiences of that big 2005 flood that was mentioned in the video. You may ask why 11 kilometers out of 72? These were prioritized sections based on an analysis of the structural vulnerabilities of the embankment. It's an earthen embankment. So of course the structural nature of it and the nature of the testing would have been different from different types of dams, but it was still possible to understand where the greatest risk reduction could be derived from targeted investments. And alongside the flood risk management project, the bank also supported the government with basically a risk assessment and a planning exercise of how to address in a more comprehensive way the flood risk in Georgetown itself. So these are the figures you see at the bottom of the screen. And the reduction in pink is the sort of projected reduction in flood extents after intervention, but addressing climate change, sea level rise, urbanization, but not the massive change, or certainly not fully addressing the massive change in the urban intensity of urban development. This part of Georgetown is already sort of developed, but if you look anywhere to the east and south, massive new urban development is taking place. So these are, I think, considerations when designing flood risk management projects. I already spoke about the strategic selection of sections of the embankment in order to maximize the effectiveness of obviously a limited financing envelope. But central to this also is the development of the methodology for upgrading and strengthening vulnerable sections of the embankment so that in the future, and in fact, this is ongoing, the government is itself investing in upgrading further sections of the embankment based on the methodologies that were improved or developed under this project. Also, the outlet structures of the Conservancy embankment were upgraded. So that also helps the irrigation function. So this large water retention body also serves an irrigation function. And so upgrading the outlet structures also helps to control or manage the irrigation function better. Zoom mentioned the importance of combining sort of sustainability measures with infrastructure investments in projects. And so what actually allows or helps the government to continue this rehabilitation program is the development of pretty much 3 operational plans. Operation and maintenance surveillance plan, construction supervision quality assurance plan, and importantly, an emergency preparedness and response plan in case breaches occur in conservancies again, or overtopping breaches. And also expanding instrumentation so that the management of water release is more data-driven. We've seen this bullet before, but one interesting tidbit was that because the Liliendal pump station is on the southern side of Rupert Craig Highway and the outfall is on the northern side of Rupert Craig Highway. Rupert Craig Highway is the most important east-west transport artery connecting the coastal regions of Guyana. And so disrupting this traffic in a period of high economic growth, high logistical needs would have been completely unpalatable. So just an interesting little point that this was the first time that trenchless tunneling technology was used in Guyana to actually install the new pipes to the outfall. Importantly, the community members, the residents, the beneficiaries actually do recognize that one single or even a suite of infrastructure investments by themselves can't solve the flooding problem. And so a lot of engagement was done around actually community participation in, for instance, not throwing solid waste into the canals. Government actually does, seasonal canal cleaning, and there are a number of NGOs, civil society organizations that are also involved in this. So just finally in terms of the impact, the number of people benefiting is about over 30% of the population, more than twice the population of the capital, Georgetown. A very massive land area that has been protected from dam breaches, and of course, areas with improved irrigation and drainage services. So I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Arteza, congratulations for the highly satisfactory. It's not really very common to have IEG coming back to us and upgrading instead of downgrading the project. So very well done. So let me move now quickly to Candice, who is going to show us about the Burundi project that is under implementation.
Thank you very much, Anna. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone, and it's indeed a pleasure to participate in today's session. Having the benefit of listening to the 2 presentations that have gone before, I'm really hoping to build on those by sharing the perspective, as Anna mentioned, from early implementation. In particular, I'd focus on three main things: how we understood the risk, how we translated that into prioritized first tranche of investments, and what we are learning now that the project has moved into early stages of implementation. So move quickly on, just a little bit on the context. I think just like the other presentations, flooding is not new in Burundi. These events have been occurring for decades, largely driven by intense rainfall, leading to pluvial flooding and river overflows. So fluvial flooding in this case. Certainly what has changed over the past decade is the scale and frequency of the events. In particularly more recently, we are also seeing stronger lacustrine or lake influence flooding from Lake Tanganyika, which is compounding the risk. Now, the city itself is growing rapidly, and a large share of that growth is unplanned. More than half of the population is living in informal areas, often in flood-prone zones, and at the same time, the city is physically constrained between the lake and steep terrain, with multiple rivers draining through dense urban areas. So what we have is a context of limited space, high density development, and very little room for water to move. And when you combine this with weak drainage systems, vulnerable housing, and lack of functional early warning, the system really has very little capacity to absorb these shocks. So you'd see in the map, the area in yellow is actually our area of or geographic scope of the project, and that is more or less the city of Bujumbura. So let me just quickly use the 2024 event to illustrate this. So in March of 2024, Lake Tanganyika rose to historically high levels. As a matter of fact, it was 777.2 meters, which was the highest level of Lake Tanganyika that was recorded in 150 years. As a result of that, it created widespread backwater effects across the city, particularly in low-lying areas like Gatumba. And you would see that area in green on the map actually is around 775 meters relative to mean sea level. So when we had record levels of 777 meters, the land area was more or less 2 meters below what the lake had risen to. And that event actually impacted over 143,000 people and caused up to $55 billion in damages, of which 40% was in the housing sector, but 22% was in agriculture. And as an agrarian society, this had a significant impact. So at the time that we were preparing the project, it was actually a $60 million operation. But because of this particular event in 2024, the project or the government was able to access the crisis response plus window and obtain an additional $53 million in financing, taking the operation to $113 million in investment. So before we go further, just to give you a little bit of context, it's important to understand how the system behaves as a whole. And I think the previous presentation in Guyana spoke to this as well. So flooding in Bujumbura is driven by interacting processes across the catchment. So upstream, we have high intensity rainfall that generates rapid runoff and high velocity flows along steep slopes, driving significant high hillside erosion and increasing sediment yield in the river system. Within the river corridors themselves, sediment contributes to channel instability, localized aggradation, reducing conveyance capacity. And of course, as flows move into the urban areas, drainage networks are typically undersized, what you'd see relative to peak runoff, and frequently obstructed, further limiting conveyance. In the lower reaches, very flat topography, as you would have seen in the slide before, and low gradients, reduce flow velocities and limit the system's ability to excavate water efficiently. And then sediment transport also affects hydraulic structures, in particular the detention basins that are built throughout the middle to lower catchment areas. And then at the downstream boundary, of course, discharge is constrained by elevated lake levels that create the backwater effect that propagate upstream. So within Bujumbura itself, the system is operating under multiple interacting constraints: reduced conveyance, reduced storage, low hydraulic gradients, and restricted outfalls, which together amplify the flood risk across urban areas. So by that stage, the analytical work that had already been completed and agreed with the government included a flood risk assessment, which was done under the flood risk management framework agreement that Anna mentioned in her presentation. So at the start of preparation, there was essentially no flood risk evidence base for Bujumbura, and this framework contract carried out by JBA and partners between 2022 and 2023 essentially filled that gap. It brought together topographic and hydrologic surveys, station data, census, and a LIDAR survey that was actually done specifically for this particular assessment. And that was used to model flood risk across the 6 major catchments in the city of Bujumbura. And importantly, it followed the structured 5-step process that Anna alluded to in her, or mentioned in her presentation, from data collection to hazard modeling, exposure and risk assessment, through to the development of a strategic investment plan that was done up to the pre-feasibility level. As I mentioned earlier, it also took a catchment-based approach. So we're looking at the system along hydrological units and not administrative boundaries. And the modeling explicitly captured both the fluvial, as well as lake flooding across multiple climate scenarios. So by the end of the preparation process, what we had for the first time was a citywide risk-based understanding of flooding that could inform investment decisions. So as part of the hazard assessment, flood depth and extent maps were developed across multiple climate scenarios. And these highlighted a strong spatial concentration of hazards, particularly in the northern Bujumbura and in Gatumba, where lake-driven flooding as well as fluvial flooding is dominant. So what did the modeling really revealed? So essentially, over 250,000 buildings, along with critical infrastructure and utility networks, were at risk. What comes out very clear from the analysis was that pluvial flooding is the dominant driver of the expected annual damages, higher than that of fluvial and lake-driven flooding. Risk was also, as I indicated before, concentrated in particular zones. For example, in the Buenze area alone, which it accounted for 25% of the annual expected damages. And in terms of exposure, the analysis showed that around 640 non-residential buildings were at risk, along with 43 utility assets, and 6% of the road network in the city of Bujumbura. The analysis also looked at how risk evolved over time. So at the baseline scenario, so this was around 2022, 2023, the estimated annual damages increase was estimated at US 36 million per annum. And then, of course, as we move into the future scenarios, so up to 2050, both in terms of medium and high climate scenarios, this exposure grew from 63 million per annum to 85 million per annum. So the case for acting now was made quite clear, because if current development patterns continue, then we estimated that the risk would become locked in with people and assets, particularly located in high-risk areas. And as that exposure grows, both the scale and losses and the cost of reducing the risk increases over time. At the same time, the assessment showed that targeted investments could reduce the expected annual damages by more than 50%. So based on this risk assessment, a full investment pipeline of approximately US 500 million was developed, covering all 6 catchments within the city of Bujumbura. And this included both gray and green infrastructure, as well as drainage systems, lakeshore protection, etc. And this SIP, or Strategic Investment Plan, essentially translated the risk analysis into a comprehensive system-wide investment framework. Now, so the key step from here was translating this into the investment framework. And as I indicated before, the modeling was undertaken at a catchment level, reflecting how the system functions hydrologically. But from an investment planning perspective, these catchments were further disaggregated into what we call catchment investment units, which represented discrete segments of the system where interventions could be defined and implemented. And this step is important because it moves from the system level understanding to the operational units that could be designed, costed, and sequenced. And each of these units was then assessed against 3 criteria, the A, B, and C. A in terms of urgency, B in terms of how the reduction overall across these catchment investment units in the expected annual damages, and of course, C in terms of the feasibility, including technical readiness, environmental and social constraints. So this provided, as I said, a structured way as to how to move from a 500 million system-wide pipeline to a prioritized set of investments. And that is essentially what drove the selection of the first tranche of investments across the highest 3 ranked catchments of Nahangwa, Mutambezi, and Ruzizi. Now, Anna mentioned in her presentation, and I believe in the Canto presentation as well, that stakeholder consultation is pivotal to developing any flood risk management and resilient project. So in Burundi, this was no different. The landscape actually is very complex. Flood management involved more than 8 institutions across national government, cities and agencies, as well as the landscape of development partners that are actually operating in Burundi and in Bujumbura. So this in prioritization of the investments that were included under the project, it took a significant level of consultation across these various governing landscapes and players in the city of Bujumbura. So the strategic investment plan eventually translated the risk reduction approach into a spatially prioritized set of interventions across Bujumbura and Gatumba. The focus being on identifying low regret investments that address flood risk across the system while remaining robust under current and future conditions. So on the map, in the red boxes, it may be a little bit small for you to read, are actually the highlight of the priority early action sites across the key catchment investment units. So upstream interventions target flow attenuation and sediment control to reduce the volume and intensity of runoff entering the urban system. Investments include green solutions such as catchment restoration, as well as gray solutions such as check dams. Through the urban corridor in the middle reaches of the catchment, the emphasis is on improving the conveyance and the hydraulic performance, including channel works, controlled drainage, and intention to manage high flows and reduce velocities and limit overtopping. And of course, at the downstream end and the interface with Lake Tanganyika, interventions address the backwater effects, lake level influence, which is a major driver to the lacustrine areas of the city of Bujumbura. And in this regard, the strategic investment plan includes the construction of perch beaches with relevant controlling terminal structures. Now, these are not standalone works. The interventions, as I said, are structured across a connected system, linking the upstream, midstream, and downstream processes across the catchment. And the selection of these sites reflects their potential to deliver early risk reduction benefits while remaining robust under a range of future conditions. So based on the priority sites and the low regret measures identified in the strategic investment plan, the investment led to the development of the Burundi Urban Resilience Emergency Project, because it's important to note that at the time that we were preparing the project, it was converted to an emergency project under paragraph 12 of the IPF policy. So what this project actually delivers is the first tranche of that pipeline. So under component 1, which is the emergency flood response and climate resilient infrastructure, which represents 91% of the financing, approximately 83 million will finance resilient infrastructure and low regret measures, and 20 million in terms of emergency response work and protection of critical infrastructure. Under component 2, it's heavily geared towards capacity building and institutional strengthening, recognizing that in reducing the flood risk, and particularly in addressing the residual risk, flood early warning system and emergency preparedness is key, as well as how do we create and build the capacity for relevant agencies to make informed decisions as it pertains to where to build. So increasing the capacity for risk-informed land use planning and urban management is also included in component 2. So following approval in July of 2024, we are now in the first 18 months of implementation. Physical works have not started yet, so it's really a pleasure to learn from the projects that have closed. So some of the challenges that we are currently facing. So what was the first 18 months show? What the first 18 months show is what actually takes to move a project from strong analytical base to delivery. So the framework contract and the SIP, in terms of what is working, filled a complete data gap. There were no prior studies, as I indicated before, and this created a consistent system-wide evidence base that is now being used across the government as well as development partners. The hydrological and hydraulic and lake modeling developed under the JBA work has provided the technical foundation for design and is being refined and updated with additional data and site-specific surveys to support detailed designs. We also leveraged an existing PIU and shared steering committee, which provides institutional continuity and enables alignment across ministries with overlapping mandates. The project benefited, of course, from hands-on expanded implementation support that was essential in preparing the terms of reference for the recruitment of the design consultant to undertake the feasibility studies and detailed designs. And of course, O&M, often mentioned as the elephant in the room, has been built in from the start of the project, with design choices already targeting reduced long-term maintenance requirements. But translating this into delivery highlights a set of constraints. So within the Burundi Urban Resilience Project, one of our key constraints, of course, is the procurement timelines. The recruitment of the design consultant alone took close to 1 year. So to address or to help mitigate these, we are currently undertaking the detailed designs for both stage 1 and stage 2 investments. Together with that, we have built capacity in the PIU for implementation or use of the emergency procurement processes. And one of the key considerations as well is when you have multiple investments across a geographic scope, then packaging of how these investments are implemented and procured are important. Additionally, what we have found is that the resettlement process, and I spoke to this earlier, takes longer than planned, and it's often on the critical part of these projects, and therefore early social team mobilization is key, so that the RAP does not become a critical bottleneck. One of the key constraints, of course, that the project is facing is the availability of specialized experts in the local markets. And to help mitigate that, we have embedded technical assistance in the PIU, international consultants for the support of critical functions. So, for example, the PIU has now engaged a consulting firm that is helping to build its risk-informed land use planning capacity, but also in terms of the design of O&M, as well as a major constraint is that of the counterpart ownership, recognizing that delivery is not driven only by the quality of analytics, and it's driven by how you structure procurement, how you sequence investments, and how we can support implementation capacity at the outset. So very quickly, we talked about what it takes to get infrastructure delivered. But there is a second issue that is just as important to mention, and that is whether infrastructure can actually be sustained over time. The key point is that O&M is often not treated as a design constraint, and in this case, different infrastructure types, recognizing that different infrastructure types have very different O&M burdens, and in this context, high maintenance solutions are often difficult to sustain under current fiscal and institutional conditions in FCV environments. So under the Burundi Urban Resilience Project, we have deliberately prioritized nature-based solutions and drainage, which sits in the lowest O&M tiers. And this is driven by the physical reality, as I mentioned before. And of course, the approach is to build O&M into the system from the start and at both the community and municipal levels. The PIU, as I indicated, has already mobilized a consultant to support the development of the O&M systems and procedures to ensure arrangements are in place. So essentially, what you build is determined not by the risk, but what can be maintained. So in summary, evidence first design is non-negotiable. Integrated flood risk management requires all 4 dimensions. Flexibility is required in an FCV context, utilizing the emergency procedures under the IPF, HICE, and adaptable TA. Coordination, architecture shapes outcome, and community ownership determines long-term resilience. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, everyone. No, that was a really fantastic presentation, Candice. And sorry for rushing you on the final part, but I think this has been a very rich set of presentations, and we want to open it for discussions and questions from the audience. Matthias, you have been the advisor of several of these projects, but also supporting us from the global knowledge on the standardization of the technical assistance and the type of support we provide to this project. Would you like to make some quick comments before opening to questions?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, and also thanks very much, of course, to Tessa and Zoom and Candice for the excellent presentations. I really enjoyed them. Of course, also seeing, let's say, some of the very familiar photos and places that I've been to. But I think what all these 3 presenters and all these 3 cases very clearly show, in my view, let's say, is of course the complexity and the interaction between the different types of flood hazards, and that you really need to understand that very carefully before you start to do any kind of intervention, whether it's the interaction between lake flooding and pluvial flooding in Bujumbura, or whether it's the interaction between coastal flooding and pluvial flooding in Guyana, or whether it's the interaction between river flooding and pluvial flooding in Canteu. All of these, let's say, complexities need to be understood first before you do effective interventions. And the other thing is, I think what Artessa also showed, she didn't show a picture, but I think she told it, the transformation of the urbanized area, and that originally, let's say, it's a very agricultural area around Georgetown, but every time, I think when we visited that area, let's say, when we came in again, you almost saw, let's say, a new urbanized area in this whole place. So to really get grip, let's say, on the urbanization in such an area is very important. I think what Candice at the end showed, I think, is a very important element for the discussion, how to better prepare and help our client counterparts with the O&M part. Because the success of any kind of intervention that we do, especially in infrastructure, in my view, let's say, is whether we help our counterparts to prepare better for the O&M phase, whether it's about funding, whether it's about protocols, asset management, whatever. I think that is important. The flood risk information management system that Jung was talking about for Canteu is, of course, already, let's say, one of the ingredients, let's say, to help a counterpart with that. And I think in Georgetown, we also, or actually Tessa and the team, we leveraged let's say, money already into the country to help them by setting up an asset management system. So I think that is an important point for discussion. And the other important element for discussion, in my view, is how can we speed up the detailed studies that are required? Because what you see in many projects that we do, I think, is that often, let's say, we do, let's say, a bank finance kind of strategic study, but then, of course, it's up to the government, let's say, to do the more detailed studies, and that often takes quite some time. And how do we do that in a better and more efficient way? So O&M and these studies, I think, are two maybe elements for further discussion. But I'll give it back to you, Anna. And but thanks again for all the very rich presentations and the good insights from these three practical projects.
Thank you, Martin. And yes, fully agree. I mean, it has been a lot of information probably to digest for everyone, but I imagine most of the people connected here are implementing or preparing projects with similar challenges. So I would like to open the mic for any questions, interventions, comments. Please, I don't see the hand, so if you can directly open the mic and make your questions or comments. You are very shy.
But maybe I can start with the question to either Zoom or Tessa. We talk a lot about what, about the, let's say, the interventions and activities, but what about the who at our counterpart side? How important is it to really have a champion at the counterpart side to drive, let's say, these kind of projects? Okay, maybe Zoom or Canteu, was that important? Was it important to have really some sort of a champion at the counterpart side?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a very crucial point actually to make the project success from the design state to the implementation, right? So basically, actually, like again, is ownership and understanding from client is really, really important. So that's why, as I mentioned earlier, so we actually did all the analytic work, but not actually like not having a firm or sending a team go to the city, do the analysis and that sort of thing. But the entire process, step by step, in a different level, we need also to engage the city in. So, for instance, in the Canteu case, for instance, the city so also established two group. One is a decision maker, group who actually like make the decision in any important step of the project preparation and implementation. At the same time, with the city also have the technical group. So basically, actually, if you see the system project actually establishes, actually is the system have been actually will build up in the technical analysis that we had. So in order to ensure that the city like have sufficient capacity to manage the system, for instance. And then they actually engage with us in the very, very beginning when we start the analytic work. So it's not, to be honest, it's not like, it's not like the smooth progress at all. It's quite bumpy on the way. Because, I mean, this is actually very helpful for us because the more questions the city put out, and the technical put out, actually the better understanding that they had. So yeah, sometimes actually consume a lot of time, but as long as actually we keep patient, keeping them actually and get a different level in the cities and the national level too, then we could get it. Yeah, so I stop here.
it's super important. And I think one thing to understand again about the broader economic context and makeup of Guyana at the time these projects were initially sort of scoped and designed 2017 to 2014. Agriculture really was sort of one of, if not the key economic sector. And so the ability to engage with that ministry to address not only the irrigation subsector, but agriculture interestingly holds the drainage portfolio as well. So there's a very strong connection between drainage, flood management, and what was then the key economic sector and still remains to be one of, if not the key non-oil and gas economic sector in Guyana. So finding that entry point and understanding sort of the bigger picture of how flood management contributes to sort of economic objectives, social objectives of the country is very important.
Anyone, if I could, maybe if I could come in with some questions. Is it Jean? Jean? So I think as we're in the early stages of implementation of the project, I'd really love to learn from your experience, particularly how you were able to translate the pre-feasibility studies and analytics into detailed designs, and how long did it take, and maybe if you have some recommendations as to how we could accelerate this process.
The magic formula.
the magic formula.
Yeah. So okay, so actually is it like of course the pre-FS or the FS and to the detailed technical design actually also this already require different state of the survey and the detail level that actually the engineering people actually look at it, right? It's really important actually, again, it's consultation with the relevant agency, because they are, before going to the approval, by the provincial people committee, like by the vice chairman who actually responsible for that, then they have to consult with a different department in the cities. So during the preparation of FS, the consultation actually were undertaken, intensively. So first of all, because the project design like that, but we also within the project for the implementation, we also do the prioritization of what infrastructure go first and what goes second. You cannot start everything at one time, right? So I mean, I'm talking about the detailed design. So that's really important, right? So the consultation with the cities, the relevant cities, is that important, very important. So when actually they enter into the detailed technical design, is it a matter of more detailed information to formulate the design in a little bit level, the detail level, for the detail level. But at that stage they did not discuss about like technical solution, or that's kind of thing. This because it already sorted out at the FS preparation. So my point is that having close engagement with the local authority and department is really important. Yeah.
Judy?
Thank you very much for all these great presentations. I have a question probably more particular to Candice, wanting to ask about the data for the citywide risk assessment. What type of data did the contract use, and how would you assess the quality and accuracy of that, or the validation of that for that purpose? And then when you enter the investment planning stage, did you gather more data, for example, more detailed DTM or site-specific data to complement and go into more specifics? Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, sorry. Maybe I should turn off. Yeah. Thanks, Julie. So at the pre-feasibility stage, under the flood risk framework contract arrangement with JBA, data was collected more or less at the global level, with the exception of LIDAR. So we specifically conducted a LIDAR survey for the purpose of developing a digital terrain model, etc., for the site. For the geographic area of influence in terms of the project geographic scope. We also utilize global data sets, so the OSM data in terms of road infrastructure, building footprints, etc., in order to build the exposure data sets and put this into a geospatial system. Now, understandably, this was the first level of data collection to inform the first flood risk resilience project in Burundi on a whole. So now that the project is being implemented, the design consultant is actually now taking that a step further in that, and even at the level of the pre-feasibility, there was some ground truthing that was done on the LIDAR information and the LIDAR data. So now that the project is being implemented and we have the design consultant on the ground, we are using traditional surveying methods, so RTK surveying, etc., to provide a higher level of detail in terms of the topographic information. So, for example, river cross sections, embankment, bridge cross sections, etc., that will now be used to further define the hydraulic model. So, for example, also on the lake side, or the data collection. So, whilst the pre-feasibility study used more of the global bathymetry information that is available, the consultant has actually conducted an eco-sounding bathymetric survey that has now been used to further refine the model. And they have now also, for example, collected more detailed wind information that has been normalized, and gaps have been filled in order to drive, for example, the lake hydrodynamic processes that is now being used to establish the design lake levels, wind transformation information, etc. So we moved from global, and now that the project is in implementation, there is a higher level of data collection that is being done to further refine the model. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Candice. And I think under the framework contract, the firms have followed similar approaches. I understand, Judy, for you also, you were working with Royal Haskoning on using the higher satellite data available kind of for the pre-feasibility level. But yeah, more details are required also for the implementation. So in that sense, I think this has been a very rich discussion. Thank you very much to all the presenters, Jisun, Arteza, Candice. I think now this is the purpose of creating the community of practices. Also, you have some colleagues, you know, people that are facing similar challenges, and you can reach out directly and to consult more specific elements. I think we will try to organize more of these sessions, and we will call it Learning from the Regions, because is really in the details of each project and the challenges and how you overcome those challenges and the opportunities that every project has, where the lessons are for everyone. So thanks everyone for joining, and we will be sharing the recording of the session and the slides for everyone. Thanks very much. I'm very appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.